what is the difference between Mexican Spanish and Spain Spanish? Well, Spain Spanish we call Castellano, whereas in Latin America, what we speak would be called Español, okay? Now, what are the differences? Well, the first big difference that I'm sure you're familiar with is the famous lisp. Now, this isn't really a lisp. This is what people call the cefeo, okay? But in Mexico, we would say something like gracias, okay, gracias. That C has the S sound. Or same thing with the word zapatos, okay? Same thing. That Z has an S sound, zapatos. Whereas in Spain, as you most likely know, we would say gracias or zapatos, okay? It's that kind of like that TH sound, right? Like through or thought, right? Gracias, zapatos, okay? Gracias, zapatos, gracias, zapatos. A little tricky for me, okay? So that's the first big difference. Next one is that in Spain, they use vosotros. In Latin America, we do not use vosotros. Do not confuse vosotros with vos. Some countries in Latin America use vos, like Argentina or Guatemala. Vos simply means tú or you, but it is not the same thing as vosotros, which means you guys or you all. But vosotros is informal. You use it with people you know and are familiar with. So for example, vosotros venís mañana, meaning are you guys coming tomorrow? Now, in Mexico or in other Latin American countries, we would not say vosotros. We would say ustedes. Ustedes vienen mañana. Ustedes vienen mañana. Now, this is important to note. Ustedes in Latin America can be both informal and formal. Whereas in Spain, vosotros is informal and ustedes is formal, okay? So in Latin America, both are informal and formal. So if you're focused on learning a more Latin American Spanish, then you're in luck because you can just use ustedes for informal and formal situations when you're talking to a group of people. So you guys or you all, okay? Now, next, in Latin America, we would say something like fui al mercado hoy, meaning I went to the market today. That is what we call the preterite, okay? Yo fui, it's a one-time action in the past. However, Spaniards tend to use the present perfect, which would be he ido al mercado hoy, meaning I have gone to the market today. Both mean the same thing in the sense that they're both trying to say, oh yeah, I did this thing today. However, in Latin America, we wouldn't say he ido al mercado hoy. It just sounds a little bit weird and it sounds a bit formal. I would also argue that in English, we wouldn't really say that either. It sounds quite formal. Ah, I have gone to the market today. It sounds very formal. It sounds, oh yeah, I went to the market today. So, fui al mercado hoy, fui, Latin America, he ido al mercado hoy, from Spain. Now, be aware that we use both. So Spaniards will also say fui, and people from Latin America will also use this idea of the present perfect. For example, ¿has ido al cine últimamente? For example, have you been to the movie theater recently? That is something you could totally say in a Latin American country, okay? Next, ¿has visto a Juan? So in Latin America, we would say something like sí, lo vi, okay? Have you seen Juan? Yes, I saw him. Lo representing Juan. I'm going to underline that, okay? Lo vi, okay? I saw him, okay? So there we go, okay? Lo vi, okay? Whereas in Spain, we would say something like sí, le vi. Now, this is the indirect object pronoun, and this is the direct object pronoun. Me personally, I would say lo vi because Juan is the only object of the sentence. Now, from what I understand, the reason that Spaniards would say something like le instead of lo in this case is because they argue that we would use le for people and lo and la for objects. That's actually what I always teach my students. Lo and la are for objects, le and les are for people. Okay, that's 95% of the time. However, there is that 5% of the time when a person, the power just went out, OMG. Hey! Okay, so 95% of the time, you are going to say, use le or les for people, but there is that 5% of the time when you're going to use lo or la for a person, because in this case, Juan is the only object of the sentence. Therefore, we would use lo instead of le, for example. When there's more than one object in a sentence, then we will use something like le to refer to Juan, a person. Okay? And then, finally, of course, we have different vocabulary differences in Mexico and Spain. I didn't include all of them in this video because there are quite a lot, but for example, in Spain, we could say something like, ¿Cómo estás, tío? Tío, meaning dude or man. What's up, man? What's up, dude? What's up, bro? In Mexico, we say something like, güey. ¿Qué onda, güey? What's up, dude? What's up, man? No one in Spain is going to say that, all right? If you were to say that in Spain, they'd be like, oh, you're from Mexico. Okay? So, ¿Cómo estás, tío? Coming from Spain. ¿Qué onda, güey? Coming from Mexico. Okay? Same thing with celular. In Mexico or in Latin America, we would say celular, okay, cell phone. In some countries in Latin America, they might say móvil, but it's more common, this is what we use in Spain, móvil, okay, móvil. There's also the word camión in Mexico, which means a bus. In Spain, we would say something like autobús. Or in Mexico, we could say something like computadora, whereas in Spain, they might say something like ordenador, for example. So there are many different vocabulary differences, but these are the main grammatical differences between Mexican and Castilian Spanish, okay? Bueno, muchas gracias por escuchar a este episodio, a este video. Espero que hayas aprendido algo nuevo. If you want to learn how to become fluent in Spanish, click the link in the video description to check out our Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy. Muchas gracias y que tengas buen día. Hasta luego.